Alright, what's going on? Okay, let's get to this thing. Let's see. What do I need to do this job properly tonight? Hmm. I guess MS Paint? Oh god. Okay. Alright, let's zoom this. That is not what we need at all. There we go. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Okay. What's going on? We should get started. I'm going to pop out the chat. We'll get going here. Please start putting things in chat you want to go over. And we will go over those. Yes, we will. Okay. Let's see if I have the right camera. Yeah, that works. Okay, very good. All right, let me get my coffee set up here. We going French press, right? We're going Death Wish coffee. Dark roast. It's nice. Tastes like cherries. All right. Okay. All right. So let's see. So far we got one request. Oh, that's a lot. Okay. Well, I guess I'll drag it out. Abby, can you go over market basket and CPI stuff? Yeah, sure I can. In fact, the easiest way to do that is going to be to pull up a question. Let me get AP Classroom up, and I'll look for one of the practice FRQs from the practice exams, and I'll probably release that as well at the same time, so that way you guys can mess with it yourselves if you want to. So if you guys want to open up AP Classroom, I'm going to unlock some of these questions as we're going over them, so you can see them while I can see them, and we can kind of work them that way. Obviously, having a piece of paper, notebook, something in front of you so you can do the work would obviously be ideal. Let me go ahead and cue this up, and we're ready to go. Okay, here we are. Okay. So let's go to practice exams. Whoops. One of the problems with using OBS, which is the streaming software, if you don't know, is that you can stare at your streaming software and you forget that that's not your screen. So I'm clicking on things that are on this computer, which are on this monitor, which is not actually what I need to be clicking on. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at practice exam 1's FRQ section. In fact, to make this easy, I'm just going to assign it anyway, regardless of whether or not it's going to be immediately helpful to us. So let's see what we got. All right, that's question 1. Not what we need for Abby's question. This is not market basket. This is banking. Interesting. And that's foreign exchange. Okay, so we'll go check another one. That's fine. Like I said, one of these will have them for sure. Let me kill that for a second. Once I find one that's decent, well, you know what? Let me just assign them all right now. That way you can just do them. So I'm assigning all these right now. Okay, now we'll take a look at them. Let's look at practice exam 2 FRQ. I mean, they got to be smart enough to have, a good selection of different FRQs on these 3 practice ones. So somewhere in here, I'm expecting we're going to find what you're looking for, Abby. Okay, question 2. It's usually a question 2 or a question 3 situation. Okay, GDP, economic growth. Yeah, this is somewhat you're talking about. Okay, so you're kind of going to have to build a market basket here, I think. If not, I could show you some questions that have it. So we can look at this one here. This one looks already particularly, juicy enough for us to work with. I'll do what I can to zoom in. So on my screen, if I can see it pretty decently on my stream, I imagine you should be able to see it pretty decently in your stream. If you're watching on a phone, God help you, but I'll do my best. So let's see if I can zoom it in a little bit for you. That is zoomed in. All right, it's about as good as it's going to get, guys. All right, so here we go. GDP, unemployment, inflation, economic growth. Okay, whatever. That's just a BS statement. We can ignore that. The following statistics are from the country of Paddyland in 2016. Dollar values are measured in 2016 dollars. What does that mean? It means that Paddyland's year 2016 is also its base year. Okay, I don't know if that's going to matter. It may not. But they usually don't give you information that doesn't have any purpose. So I noticed the base year because they're saying these values are 2016 values. Remember, if we look up like gross box office or something like that for a movie, we can look at the current year, or we can look at years that are, or we can look at all the, we can look at all the box office gross based on its own year's pricing, right? Which obviously is going to heavily favor modern movies. Where if you stake one ticket price, doesn't matter what year, 1985, doesn't matter, and then every single movie is done on 1985 prices, that makes 1985 the base year. Yes, we can, Caitlin, no worries. That's an easy one. That's no problem. We can definitely go over that. It might even come up in this question, theoretically. Okay. So we got some information. Let me just kind of break down some of the information here, because things that we maybe don't know. Oh, that's bizarre. Why is GDP deflator in 2016 90? Okay, let me rephrase that. It may not be the base year. In fact, wrong screen. See, I just did that. All right, it's not necessarily the base year. In fact, it's not the base year. I can promise you that because it's a 90 GDP deflator. The reason I know it's not the base year is because they're saying it's measured in 2016 dollars. That just means current year dollars. So actually, in reality, this is just nominal values. That's their way of saying these are nominal, not real values. And you even have a deflator here, so we can actually figure out the real values in a moment. So let me correct myself. This is not the base year. Okay, so what do you got? You got some data here to help you figure out how to calculate GDP. So remember, there's two ways to calculate GDP. There's the expenditure approach or spending approach, same thing, which is consumption, investment, government, net exports. Remember, net exports is exports minus your imports. You got to subtract the imports out. Taxes have nothing to do with it. That's a red herring. Ignore that. You also have some data here for what looks to be unemployment data, labor force participation, things like that, and then the deflator. So they just gave you sort of a handful of data stuff, and they want you to see what you can do with it. Let's find out. All right, calculate each of the following and show your work. So how do you calculate nominal GDP? All right, hold on. Let me pull up the calculator, and then we'll... Okay. I'll put it right there so we can see it. Okay, so calculate nominal GDP. All right, that's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is add up all those values I was discussing with you. So you're going to add up the 90 from consumption. You're going to add up 65 from investment. You're going to add up the 50 from government spending. Now, stop there. That's your domestic. That's everything that's made and bought and sold in the U.S., okay? Now, you then can add to that your exports, the stuff you make and sell other places. So you can add that to this. So add another plus 25 for the exports. Then you have to... What did I do? I did something wrong there. Sorry. So we had 205. Sorry. Plus the $25 export value, 230. That seems correct. And then you got to subtract from that the imports that we're bringing in. So that's going to be negative 50. That's your final GDP total for nominal. If I fat fingered it and hit the wrong key or something, that might have happened. But that is how you do it. So you add your consumption, your investment, your government, and your exports, and you subtract out the imports. Taxes have nothing to do with it. Leave that alone. Real GDP. Okay. So real GDP is going to require you to deflate the value, right? So how do you do that? You divide this value, this nominal value here. Let me go to this. Okay. You divide this nominal value by the GDP deflator, and then you times that by 100. And actually, in this case, because your GDP deflator is below 100, that means that prices in this year are cheaper than the base year. So actually, real GDP is actually higher. So inflation has not declined the value of the dollar in that particular year. GDP actually Is so your real GDP is higher than your nominal. It's totally normal, totally possible. I'm glad we had a chance to see a question that does that, because it's just based on the fact that the prices of the deflator year of 2016, this year, are lower than the base year. Base year is always 100, right? So that's all. That's how you know it's the right number. Again, maybe I fat fingered something, but that is the way I did it, and that's the way it should be done. So that's probably the right answer. I can pull up the answers in a second if you want to. Okay, real GDP per capita. So again, you take this number and you divide it. Now, what are you dividing it by? You're dividing it, and by the way, see it says calculate? Let me be clear with you, because you all are going to have calculators for this. That says calculate. You have to show you have to show this work on paper. You can't just do what I did on a calculator and slap down numbers. You have to lay this out, right? So write out C plus I plus G plus NX. Get that number, right? Then take that number. Okay, divide by GDP deflator times 100, bang. That's your nominal GDP, regular real GDP. And make sure you put dollar figures, right? Because these are dollar values. This is even though it's Paddy Land, they're using the dollar symbol, so make sure you put it in there. And always take a look. Are these millions of dollars, billions of dollars? In this particular case, they're just dollars. Like, this is just $90. They didn't say this is 90 million or measured in millions of dollars or anything like that, okay? So real GDP per capita, you're going to take your real GDP, $200, and you divide that by your population, your total population. Not labor force, nothing like that. The whole population, everybody, man, women, child, space alien, infirm, doesn't matter. So there's a $4 GDP per person, GDP per capita, $4 per person. That's going to be the answer there. Okay, so pretty straightforward. God darn it, I hit the wrong thing again. Dragging my stream all over the place. So that is going to be the right way to do it if you're doing it in this case. So Debbie's a citizen of Wayland, owns a computer software firm in Paddy Land. Is the output produced by Debbie's computer software firm included in Paddy Land's nominal GDP? Calculated in Part A. Explain. Okay, very complicated way of saying is this counted in GDP. So here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter who owns something. It doesn't matter where the ownership of the company is. It doesn't matter. All that matters is physically where is the product made. That is all that matters. Where is the product made? If it's made in your country, it counts for your country. It's simple as that, okay? So it doesn't matter if, I don't know, a Harley Davidson is owned by a South Korean firm. If they're made in the United States, they count for U.S. GDP. So she's a citizen of Wayland. This is Paddy Land, and she owns a computer software firm in Paddy Land. Does her stuff count for Paddy Land? Yes, it does. Why? It's made in Paddy Land, and GDP counts all domestically produced product, regardless of who owns it. That's it. That's your explanation. There's nothing more to be said about it. It really doesn't matter who owns it. All right. The GDP deflator in Paddy Land, for Paddy Land 2015 was 110. In 2016, was Paddy Land experiencing inflation or deflation, or is there insufficient information to determine Paddy Land's economic condition? Explain. Okay. So a couple things about this question. Be careful that they didn't ask about disinflation. Now, that would be wrong, so they shouldn't. But, you know, they could have said deflation, disinflation, or inflation. So, if in 2015, which is a previous year to Paddy Land, right, you could do this one of two ways. You could do just common sense. They're asking you to explain it, so I can show you how to explain it, okay? You could still do the rate of inflation change by doing new minus old over old. In this case, the newer value is lower, 2016 being a more modern year than 2015. So, new minus old over old times 100 will give you the percentage of change in inflation. Excuse me. So let's do that, and then I'll explain. You don't really need to do this because the answer is somewhat obvious, but I'll do it anyway. So if you have a 90, and I'm getting the 90 from the GDP deflator down here for 2016, that's the newer year, minus old, 2015 was 110, divided by 110, times 100. New minus old over old, okay? So I have an 18%, give or take, decrease in percentage of inflation, right? Negative 18 means an 18% decrease in inflation. So is this deflation, inflation, or I'm going to throw this out there, is it disinflation? And the answer is it's deflation, specifically 18%. Now, why is it deflation? Well, you can look at that and just see that the GDP value of 110, the GDP deflator value, of 110 is a bigger number than 90. So clearly prices are lower in 2016. Now, what makes that makes it a deflation, right? Because it's lower, but that's not the only reason. For it to be deflationary, it has to be below 100. Because if it's above 100, say it was 110 in 2015, but it was actually falling to only 105 in 2016, it would still go down. This would still be a negative percentage, but it's not deflation. That'd be disinflation. You still have inflation, right? Prices are still going up. They're just going up less fast. By going below 90, that becomes a deflation. You actually are reducing prices down below even the base level year. So the curve is not just flattening, it's actually in decline, which is different, okay? So this is a deflationary period right here. And you can explain it with the math, or you can just say, because the GDP deflator in 2016 is 90, and that is lower than 100 and less than the 110 of 2015, this is deflation. And that would be sufficient also. Calculate unemployment rate. Okay, unemployment rate gets people all the time. And Abby, I will find the question that speaks to what you asked. Okay, I was hoping this would lead us there, but it didn't, obviously. So, I will find you market basket. It's very simple. We'll do it, and if I have to, I'll just make one up. But I can find one pretty quickly. So, unemployment rate. To do that, we're going to need our labor data. Here we go. So to get the unemployment rate, all you need is just the unemployed number of people divided by the labor force times 100. Because the rate's got to be a percentage, right? That's all you need. Now, you don't have an unemployed number here. You have labor force, population, employed. That's what you have. Population's got nothing to do with it. Now, they could ask you other questions here, and we'll go over that too, because you know what I told you they do. They will, for example, see how that's its own image? That means nothing stops them from taking that image, cutting and pasting it to a different question, and asking different questions with that data. They 100% could. So don't think for a second that somehow, this has to be the question. Not at all. So that's why I want to give you some examples of other questions they get asked with these three numbers. But let's do the one they asked. They want to know the unemployment rate. Okay, so the unemployment rate is going to be, you take the unemployed number of people. So Abby, yes, I'll do your question. So Abby asked about the last question. If you show the math, can you just say this is a deflationary period? Yes, you can. You can use math as your explanation as long as you clearly say what the result of the math was. So if you show the new minus old over old and go, according to the calculation, this is a deflationary period, that would be fine. They will absolutely accept that. Remember, most of these people are math nerds anyway. So I mentioned this once before. You can even write mathematical notation and they have to take it. I mean, very, very, very few kids are going to do that, but you can. Okay, so back to the unemployment rate. So how do you figure out how many people are unemployed in this economy? Well, the trick, the fake, the trap is to get students to go, okay, we have 20 employed people and we have a 50 population. That means there's 30 unemployed. No, there's not. To be unemployed requires two things. You have to have no job and be seeking a job. And on top of that, remember, you have to qualify. You have to be a working age population, non-institutionalized. So the simpler way to figure that out is, what is the definition of labor force? We do have that number. Labor force is just your unemployed people and your employed people added up. So if I've got 20 employed and I have a 25 labor force, 25 labor force minus 20 employed means I have 5 left over. That 5 is my unemployment number. That's the number of people unemployed. So to figure out the rate of unemployment, I take my unemployed number of people, I divide it by my current labor force, I times that sucker by 100, and I got a 20% unemployment rate. That's it. Simple as that. Just make sure you put that down with a percentage. Make sure you lay it, this is the unemployment rate. That's the only math you need to show, honestly. Sorry. Okay. So, right. So that's your unemployment rate. That's how you do that. That's the whole question. Pretty simple one, to be honest. Okay. Let me look once more. I'm going to check the third of these practice ones because I do want to see if by any chance this FRQ, I did not assign it. I thought I did. I'm assigning it now. Let's look at it just to make sure that the market basket question wouldn't be found here. Again, I would be a little calculate. Okay, Phillips curve, required reserve 25%. Well, that's a tricky one. Okay. Not hard, just a lot of stuff going on. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Ooh. Not hard, but you might not have seen that before. We might want to go over that one. Hold that thought. We might want to go over that one. Here we are. Here's your market basket. Okay, I told you they'd have one. So here you are. Okay, we got a market basket. So first off, let's go over what is a market basket and how can they use it and how do they often use it. So a market basket is a fake way in the real world. It's a real way of determining the type of spending done by a typical American family so the government can make policy decisions informed by how Americans spend. That's all it does. And we've been using it for generations, okay? Now, what it is, you're going to go in, you're going to grab a basket of goods that typically represent the purchasing of a family of four in an urban environment. That definition is not going to factor into these questions when you get this. Instead, they're going to give you really something abstracted, like this. Country, whatever, what country is this? They even say? Fruitland. Okay, so in the country of Fruitland, they make two things. Stunner, fruit. But not just any fruit. Only apples and only oranges. That's all they make. So what that means is any sales, any price value of these products is its GDP. What is GDP? A value of all the goods you make in a country. So think that through for a minute. It's like a two birds and one stone thing. And you've seen this type of thing before. They do it commonly. They'll take two products. They'll say these are the only things this country produces. Hell, they could ask you to draw a production possibilities curve on this data. And you would have to have two lines. One for year one, one for year two. They could absolutely do that. They might. I have not looked at these questions. They might. I will say. But they could absolutely do that. Hey, take that data and why don't you plot a production possibilities with that? You could do that. Oranges on one thing, apples on the other. It wouldn't matter which axis has which label in this case for production possibilities. And you don't have to sort of show anything other than straight lines connecting the number of apples to the number of oranges for each of those years, and that'd be it. It'd be a very simple thing to do, but they could ask it. So back to the basket. So because there are only two products, and they give you prices and they give you quantities, you can figure out the total value of all the goods produced in this economy. Therefore, this is also not just going to give you the market basket, but it's also going to be a representation of its GDP. Very simplified example, but it is the GDP of Fruitland. Two products, certain number of quantities at certain prices. Do the multiplication, that's your GDP. And almost certainly they're going to ask you that stuff. So when you are being asked to calculate the nominal GDP for any particular year, Abby, and whoever else is interested, you are being asked to calculate the market basket. That is the same thing. So let's do it. Where's my handy dandy calculator? Pow, here we go. Okay, clear it. And we're asked to do nominal GDP for year two. Okay, nominal GDP for year two. So how do you do that? Take year two, take the number of apples, 10, times it by the price. I don't like that there are no dollar value signs here. I don't like these numbers just being numbers with no symbols. It can lead to a mistake, so do be careful. So it's 6, we'll call them dollars. I don't know what Fruitland uses. We'll call them dollars. So we're going to figure out the total cost of apples in this economy of year two. So $6 per apple times 10 apples. That's year two's apple market basket value, $60. Now there's other stuff in the market basket. Let's find out what that is, right? So let's put that number aside for now and let's find out what that is. So your oranges are $5 and we made 20 of them. That's $100. So we have a $100 basket. We had a $60 a $100 item, a $60 item. We have a total basket of 10 apples at $6 a piece, 20 oranges at $5 a piece. Overall value added up, multiplied, all that is $160 for the market basket in year two, which in this case, because it's the only products they make, is also their nominal GDP. Is it their real GDP? Nah. We don't know anything about base years or anything yet. We haven't seen it. No, I haven't seen any information on it. I don't think it's in here somewhere. Let me look. Nope, it's not. So maybe later on they'll tell us what the base year is, but for right now they have not. Okay? So we'll get back to that. Okay. All right, now, here we go. Using base 1 as the base year, calculate real GDP for year 2 and show your work. Okay, so calculating, using year 1 as the base year. Okay, so what do? You take the quantities of year 2, so that's going to be what we just did, 10 and 20, but rather than multiply them by their year 1 prices, you're going to multiply, their year 2 prices, you're going to multiply them by the year 1 price because it's the base year. It's like taking the movie ticket example. So I can take all the movie tickets Avatar sold and Endgame sold and all that, and I can compare them to every other movie in history. All I have to do is pick any year, doesn't really matter which, 1985, 1999, 2007, 2015, 2025, doesn't matter. Multiply every ticket ever sold for any movie in any year by the price of that set year being the base year. And then I can make a real comparison, right? Because then it's really obvious. I mean, if the prices are all set in stone, like I'll give you an example. I already know that in real terms, more Apple value exists in year one than year two. Why? Because year one at a price of 4 had 15 apples get sold. And year two, if we're using real values and using base year as year one, 4 apples times 10 is a smaller number. Like that's very obvious to me. So you can immediately make those sort of assumptions here. Now, they want you to do more than assume. They want you to calculate. So let's calculate. All right, so we're figuring out real GDP year two. So how do you show that? Again, you're going to take your $4. Now, in this case, that's the year one price because that's the base year. And you're going to times that by those year two quantities of apples. $40 in real terms for apples in year two. Put that aside for a moment. We're going to take the year one price of oranges at $10. We're going to times that by the number of oranges in year two, which are 20 oranges. So it's $200 worth of oranges there. Add that up with our $40 worth of apples, and we have a real GDP of year two of $240 when we use base year, year one as our base year. If we use a different year as the base year, it would be a different result. But as year one is the base year, this is our real GDP for year two. All right, so hold that for a second. Calculate the GDP deflator for year two and show your work. Okay, so GDP deflator. In fact, there's a good chance to show you this. So I don't know who this guy is. No clue. But there's a dude named Charles Feng. No idea who he is. And 10,000 years ago, back when I was a younger man with hair, I think I literally Googled AP macro review sheet. This was in the early days of my career. Back when my scam was more of a scam. And it came up. Now, what came up? I don't know. This is probably it. Yeah, this is it. So, it's a study guide, version 1.0. I've never seen a version beyond 1.0. And this literally has, I've shown this before, this literally has everything in the course on it, with the exception of reserve market, and it probably still has some old school stuff that's not true anymore, but not a lot. Stuff like M2 having savings accounts in it, or some material you don't need to know anymore, like Okun's Law. You don't need to know that anymore. So, but in terms of what he does list everything by the 6 units. So these are all true. That's all legit. Knowing these things is critical. This gets tested every time. Knowing it is critical. The 4 resource types right here. Boom. Factors of production, which is basically the same idea. There it is. What's the production possibility curve, etc., etc., etc. How do you calculate GDP? It's all here. So, including that new minus old over old, this growth rate formula, well, that growth rate doesn't have to be for GDP. It could be for anything. It could be for any 2 values you want to determine the percentage of difference between. So it could be for GDP growth. It could be for inflation rate growth. It could be for population growth. I used to know that the AP environmental science kids used to do that for population growth. So anyway, this guy's got all this stuff. So odds are very high. GDP deflator and how to calculate it will be here as well. It might not be because it might have been one of the newer things. See, something like Okun's Law, you don't have to know that anymore. That's an old thing. But you can use this. Feel free to use this. A graph like that's quite old. We don't need that. That's the Keynesian cross. But this you've seen. This is the 3-stage supply curve with the demand curve. I have shown you that. Anyway, and even stuff like how to handle recessionary situation. This is what the government actually does do. So it is a good little practice, worth the read, especially if there's something you don't really understand. Odds are very good. Everything in here is going to still be accurate. It may not all be tested. Again, M2 might be a little meh, but regardless, you definitely want to go through this. Anyway, back to our question. I did not notice the GDP deflator thing in there, but I did want to nevertheless bring this up. So, how do you calculate GDP deflator? GDP deflator calculation. Super simple. Now, it's a little weird because all you have to do it is that right there. So your GDP deflator is you take the nominal GDP for any particular year, divide it by the real GDP for any particular year, times 100. Once again, times 100 is all over the place, pretty much everywhere. That might be one of those formulas you go, you know what, man? I'm going to put that in the cheat sheet because I didn't remember exactly how to do that. Then put it on the cheat sheet. Like that's, that your mileage may vary on the stuff you got to put on there. But this is something, and remember, my $20 bounty still counts tomorrow. If you bring me a cheat sheet by tomorrow, and I think it's the best one of anybody. By the way, there's a real chance you're the only person who brings me one. So you might win by default. Even if I don't like it, I'm going to give it to somebody. So, don't forget that. Engage ChatGPT to make you a good one. Remember, it's my decision whether or not it's the best one. All right, I'm looking at more factors than just completeness of information. Anyway, there it is, deflator. Nominal GDP over real times 100. So let's go back to our calculations. So we have a real GDP of 240 now. Our nominal GDP was, Jesus, I don't remember, 160 plus 100, 160. Okay, so real is there. So your nominal was 160 divided by your real of 240 times 100. Deflator of 66.66 repeating. Sounds right to me. Check my math on that, but I'm pretty sure I did that right. Okay. Show your work. I just did. Literally slap down that equation, slap down an answer. You're going to be good to go. All right. Now, calculate the consumer price index. Okay, this is good because this is different than the GDP deflator. They really are trying to get their money's worth on this. Okay, so assuming the market basket is composed of the quantities in year one, calculate the consumer price index for year two, and show your work. Okay, so this is actually more accurate to how this is done for market baskets. So, Abby, you hit the gold mine with this question because it actually does cover everything you want to know about it. So, in the real world, the way market baskets work, right? Do I have a basket? No, I got a baggie. Okay, so here's a bag with some stuff in it. Now, if I put everything human beings buy in the United States, and let's say all they buy are these black metal brackets, that's it, and I put it in this basket, or this baggie, and I write on it, okay, this is a $5 bracket 2025, and I throw that in the corner. When I come back next year in 2026 to do the same market basket, I have to use the same quantities, or using them as a comparative for year to year doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. Like if there's 3 of these in this baggie next year, that's no good because I'm comparing 3 units being produced to 1 unit being produced, and of course the price is not going to have any relevance. So I have to make sure the same quantities are in the baggie every single year if I want to make a CPI. So how do you make CPI? Consumer Price Index, that was definitely on that Charles Feng sheet. We slipped right past it, so hang on. Consumer Price Index is you take the market basket in the year you want to know about. You take the dollar value of that market basket and you divide it by the market basket in... Did I pass it? I passed it. Hold on, go back. You divide it by the market. Here it is, right here. So you take the CPI, you take the market basket cost, the dollar price of the year you're interested in, the current year we call it, okay? Then you divide that by the same market basket cost of the base year, which is not going to be 100. You're going to have to actually do the math as to what the market basket is for that base year, and then times that business by 100, and that'll give you CPI. So let me show you how to do that here. So what you're going to do, again, we're going to kind of be changing it up from what we did just previously now, because this is going to be different. You're going to take the nominal, you're going to take the prices from year 2. To figure out for year 2, it's market basket cost. But you're going to use quantities from year 1. They tell you that. Use quantities from year 1 because that's what the market basket is composed of. So it's a little bit weird. We just did 4 times 10 and 10 times 20. We're now going to do 6 times 15 and 5 times 4. So you're taking quantities from year 1 to prices from year 2. So $6 for apples in year 2. Times $15 in the basket. Sorry, 15 apples in the basket. I apologize. $6 an apple times 15 apples in the basket. This is for year 2. We're using year 2 prices with the same quantities as the base year. Every year needs to have the same quantities or this comparison to make a CPI will not work. You then add to that the result of 5 times 4. All right, the price of oranges times in year 2 times the quantity in year 1. I'll spare you the calculation. 5 times 4 is 20. So add to that 20. That is the dollar value cost of your market basket in year 2 when you're using the same exact quantities from year to year to year. Okay, so we're going to put that aside for now, that 110 we need. We now need to repeat the same thing for year one. So we're going to keep the year one quantities. We're going to use year one prices. And now we're going to figure out what the market basket cost in year one. So 4 times 15 plus 10 times 4 is 40. So obviously, that's obviously going to be 100, right? So we have 110 in the year we care about and 100 in the year that is the base year. We know it's the base year because they said it's the base year up here. And we also know it's the base year because we're using the quantities from year one. That means it's the base year. So they told us that in the previous question, and they're keeping to that in this question. So $110, okay, again, I'll go back to, here it is, right there. $110 divided by the 100 of that base year basket times 100, 110 consumer price index. That's your answer. So none of this is particularly hard, but obviously you need to know what to do, right? Like, okay, sure, any one of you can do 100 and, whatever it was. 110 divided by 100 times 100. Everyone, you can do that. And that they're not questioning that, especially on with a calculator. They're questioning if you know that's what you have to do. And that'll be the tricky one. Now, suppose apple and orange pickers received a 2% increase in their wages, okay? Based on your answer to part D, would real wages of apple and orange pickers increase, decrease, or stay the same from year one to year two? Okay, there's a quick answer, but there's the more thorough answer. I'll give you the more thorough answer. This is a pretty challenging question. They really are digging in here. All right, what they're basically asking you to do is figure out the rate of inflation from year one to year two, which is very easy if you're confident you know what you're doing. But I've warned about doing it this way many times. So I'm going to go through the long way, and then I'll explain the short answer. So we have to figure out the rate of inflation from year one to year two. Now we can do that. We have 110 price index for year two. We just figured that out. So here we can do new minus old over old. We just did that, right? Rate of inflation. So 110 price index for year one minus 100 price index. Sorry, I apologize. 110 price index for year two minus a 100 price index for year one. How do I know year one's got a 100 price index? Because they told us it's the base year. Base years always have a 100 price index. So new minus old over old. Year two is 110. Year one's 100. And you're dividing that by 100. And you're timesing that by 100. And that's your 10%. 10%. That's a percentage. 10% change in prices from year one to year two. Now, the year one market basket is 100. The year two market basket was 110. If you know that you're comparing two index values and one of them is the base year, whatever the difference is in those numbers, in this case it's 10, right? The difference between 110 and 100, that is your percentage. That will be the percentage. They know that. They realize that. That's why they gave these numbers as they are. Remember, though, please, that only applies if you're comparing the base year to some other CPI value. If you had two CPI values that were not this base year, I'll show you an example of this right now. You can't just take the difference in the index values. That will not be the percentage. So I'll give you an example. Suppose you have 2 years, year two, year one. Neither is the base year. And you're being asked, okay, what is the inflation rate between these 2 years? And let's just say year two had 120 inflation and year one had 110 inflation. That's a 10 difference on the index values. Is it a 10% change of inflation? No, it is not. Because if you do the math, new minus old over old times 100, it's only a 9.09, 9.1% change in inflation. Because again, you got to do the math. So if you're comparing against the base year, fine, the difference will do you. But if it's any other two values, you must do the new minus old, the percentage of change formula. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get it right. It will be wrong. And they're aware of that. They're aware kids do this, and they set up traps for this all the time. This was not one of those traps. This was actually meant to be a little bit easier. Now, the real question, we're not even done, is we had a 10% change in inflation. They're telling you workers received a 2% increase in their wages. These are nominal increase. Are these people in real terms having a real wage increase, a real wage decrease, or is it staying the same? Well, let's see. We had a 2% increase in wages, and they had a 10% increase in prices. They're broke. They lost 8% real value on their wages. Can you show that math as your explanation? Absolutely. You could say the nominal minus real, or real, sorry, I should say nominal minus inflation equals real, right? So you can say nominal value of 2 minus this inflation of 10%, right? Because it's a 2% increase, 10% decrease from the inflation leaves them with a negative 8% real wage. They have lost tons of real value. They don't know it. They get their paycheck. They're going to think they're wealthier, but in reality, they are substantially poorer when the year starts than they actually thought they were. They would have been better off with no change. If prices had stayed the same and they had never gotten a raise, they would have been wealthier than if they had gotten a raise and prices changed as much as they did here, because these prices went up quite a bit. So that is how you do that question. So there's a lot there, obviously, pretty detailed, but I was asked to find a market basket question. I found you a market basket question. I don't see anybody else asking anything, so I'm going to take it upon myself. This question, too, was pretty tricksy, so I want to look at this one. All right, if y'all got questions, please put them in the chat, okay? Because I can't do it all without you guys giving me some sort of guidance, okay? I know everything, so I have to find out what you don't know. But this question here does look a little tricky to me, so I want to kind of go through it. All right. Suppose U.S. government implements a fiscal policy that increases. Can you go over capital and current? Yeah, that's a good one, Abby. In fact, that's going to come up here. Capital and current account is worth going over. Absolutely. That's clearly a weakness, no doubt about it. Okay. As I glance through this question, some of that will come up here. All right, here we go. Suppose U.S. government implements a fiscal policy that increases the budget surplus. All right, so suppose they do that. Now, what does it mean to increase the budget surplus? That is tricky, so listen. It means that this government is not borrowing. In fact, the opposite. They have a budget surplus. That means they have excess monies sitting around that they do not need to spend. So if you want a real-life comparison to that, your school district does this. We have an emergency reserve. The emergency reserve is technically a surplus. We have more dollars in our budget than we are going to spend. That's a reserve. That's a surplus. Okay? That's simple as that. So we don't have to borrow. Quite opposite. We have excess monies and we can put some of them aside, save them, whatever we're going to do with them. All right? That's how this works. So draw a correctable graph of the loan funds market and show the effect of the increase in the budget surplus on the equilibrium real interest rate. Okay. So if the government's got a budget surplus, or something happens that increases their surplus. Now, what can increase their surplus? I don't know. They tax the public, and they don't spend the money. Government taxes the public, gets some extra bucks, stick it in the pocket, don't spend it. Okay. So what would happen there is I'd expect to see a decrease in, and I'm going to pull up the answer key just to check because there probably are two answers here. I'd expect to see a decrease in demand, or I'm trying to think of an increase in supply as possible here. So they don't tell you, I'm thinking out loud as I explain. They don't tell us which line to move. They don't say show the effect in demand or show the effect in supply. So let's draw the graph firstly, right? Let's do that. Can I minimize this? I sure can. Okay. All right. Let's move it. Oh, God. That's not helpful at all. Okay. All right. We'll do our best. All right, so loanable funds market, right? So I'm going to use the text tool to make my life a little bit easier. So loanable funds market. Okay, here's our graph. Zippity-doo-dah. We're going to have real interest rate or rates, your call. They'll take either one. Down over here, we're going to have quantity. All you need, as long as you have a title, quantity is all you're going to need. And then, of course, we have our lines, right? We got D and S. We have our equilibrium point, which A. And we got a dotted line. God help me. Here we go. And this is hyper ghetto. Okay, so any R will do. Capital or lowercase, doesn't matter. They'll even take IR. They're not super picky on that stuff. And this is just Q. They're certainly not super picky on that. Oh, I'm sorry. My fat head's in the way of this. Hold on. There. Okay. So that's your setup of your loanable funds market. That's the part you're going to need to get 1 point. Now, my expectation is they're going to definitely allow you to pick a lower demand. D1. Show your arrow. Show your new point. Show your new equilibrium of R1 and Q1. Please spare me not having to draw all that. My expectation is they're going to accept that answer. That's the answer that they're expecting. I am trying to think of a justification of why it might be. Now, why am I assuming it could be an increase in supply as an also possible answer? Because that also lowers interest rates. Right? If the government's not borrowing, the government's not borrowing, the government has extra money. So, but the government is also not a lending agency. Like the government doesn't take its surplus and lend it to the public. So that's why I'm not so sure an increase in supply is really possible to be valid here. My instincts say no. My instincts say if we pull up the key, it's going to show a decrease in demand and not going to allow for an increase in supply. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. I'm going to pull up the key. Where's the key? Oh, it's right here. Okay. So they do allow for the increase in supply. Okay. I said they might. I said they might, which is great. Awesome. I'm not sure how you justify it because, again, I don't see the link where the government's taking the money that they have as a surplus and re-injecting it into the economy. Like, where it's not like it's going to private savings. So I'm not sure. But, again, government does make loans in the form of things like the discount rate. So maybe it's that. I'm not sure. But regardless, they are taking it. So as you can see, it is possible. Notice that the reality, though, the bottom line is they asked you to show, and I'll go back and show you this. They asked you to show the effect on equilibrium real interest rate. And in both of these cases, equilibrium real interest rate is declining. Remember I told you they want to see arrows showing direction of changes. There they are. You see the arrows. Man, don't play with that. Show arrows. Okay, let's get rid of the key. So either way, we'll go with my response because I imagine most of you would have done a demand shift here. Again, that's a tricky one because they talk about budget surplus. The government's not borrowing. It's the opposite. The government's rolling in cash at the moment. All right, the European Union is a major trading partner of the U.S. Given your answer in Part A about the real interest rate, will the United States dollar appreciate or depreciate against the euro, and explain? Now, this is a great example. A lot of things happen when interest rates change. A lot of things. This gets into capital and foreign and current account, by the way, Abby, so stick with me. And then Caitlin will do the interest rate thing after this, I promise, because this is actually this. I'm sorry. Actually, Caitlin, we're hitting your question right now. This is the interest rate question. So, there's 3 effects from interest rate. All right, are there 3 or are there 4? Okay. There's like 4. The first question, interest rate changes. It doesn't matter how. Nominal, real, whatever. Foreign exchange, reserves market, loanable funds, any of the graphs have interest rates. Now, listen carefully. The first question is the follow-up to that. Are you being asked to look at domestic effects or foreign effects, international effects? Let's shut away the foreign effect for a moment and stick to the domestic effect. This question is about the foreign effect. We'll get back to it. The domestic effect is if interest rates go up, and you can write this down. These are rules. You can just memorize these rules and go, go, go. They're true every time for your domestic economy. If interest rates go up, 2 things will happen. Really 2.5, and I'll explain the half. Number 1, people will want to save more of their money. Remember, you have a binary money option. Spend or save. That's it. Binary money option. People will choose to save more money if interest rates are higher. Explain. Because if interest rates are higher, your opportunity cost to not save goes up. Let me show you what I mean. So, in true Sicilian fashion, I keep a box of money here. All right? Don't come to my house. All right? I have dogs and booby traps. So, in this box of money, okay, I got some gemstones. They're real. They're not worth anything. I've got some cash. All right, here's a 20. Now, this $20 bill is not being saved. This is not being saved. This is an extravagant wallet. So is your cookie jar, your change jar, the bottom of your car floor, the inside your couch cushions where your money fell out. That is an extravagant wallet. That is not savings. That is being held for some future purpose. Remember, money demand, right? Has transaction demand, speculative demand, and precautionary demand. This is not savings. It may look like I've saved it. I've not saved it. If I was saving it, I'd have it in an institution that gives me an interest rate. So right now, by having this money in this box, I am accepting the loss of interest I could have on this money. Now, what are my options for the interest? Well, if I stick it in a bank account, it's not very much. 0.5%. So maybe I value the liquidity and the access to the cash in my place here under lock and key more than I value, let's say, a couple of, a 0.5% interest in a savings account. But that is an opportunity cost. I could take this money, right? Just an example. I could take this money and I could put this money in something like a stock exchange fund. and probably get like 8% or 9% or something like that, even in a bad economy. 10% is average. So I am losing that. That's an opportunity cost. But so if interest rates go up, my desire to keep this money as cash here goes down. My desire to keep money in even a savings account is going to go down because I'm going to want it in a less liquid form if interest rates continue to rise. I want to take advantage of those interest rates, okay? So that's opportunity cost. So if interest rates go up, I am less likely to want to hold on to cash. Now, what if interest rates go down? If interest rates go down, I am more likely to spend my money because I'm not losing anything for spending it, right? Like if I say to you, look, save your dollar and I'll give you a penny tomorrow. Okay, what's a penny? Spend my dollar. If I say save your dollar and I'll give you a dime tomorrow, well, that's 10%. It might be worth saving your dollar, passing up on the opportunity to spend it today to get that 10%. So the more you're going to get back, the more likely you are to save the money and not spend it. So if interest rates fall, you're more likely to spend. Now, that's effect sort of number one. It's based on how people perceive the interest rate effect on their spending. If interest rate goes up, they're going to want to spend less and save more. If interest rates go down, they're going to want to spend more and borrow at the same time. So let's talk about borrowing. The other side of the domestic economy when it comes to interest rates is borrowing. Not just spending and saving, but borrowing, right? Which is a whole different matter. If interest rates are very high, I'm less likely to borrow, which of course means I'm less likely to buy the kind of products you need to borrow for. Cars, houses, appliances, big ticket items, vacations, whatever, credit card. Less likely to do that stuff in high interest rate times. In low interest rate times, I'm much more likely to make these purchases. So as a result, in domestic economies, if there is going to be higher interest, less borrowing. If there's lower interest, more borrowing. Now, I said there were 2.5 effects. What's the 0.5? The 0.5 effect is a knock-on effect to this borrowing thing. Borrowing is done by the interest-sensitive components of your economy. That is consumers and businesses. Remember, consumption and investment spending. Remember, investment spending is special. It's special. It's the only one of the types of spending that consistently and predictably improves the quantity and quality of a resource, specifically capital goods / capital stock / capital formation. All three of those are valid terms for it. So when businesses spend money on refurbishing an old abandoned McDonald's in Wading River to turn it into a Starbucks, that is a permanent asset. That's a permanent investment asset that offsets the depreciation of the asset. They also add into it new infrastructure, new cabinets, new wiring, new refrigeration, new whatever the hell. It's permanent. That stuff is permanent. So when you do that, it adds permanent value to the economy. That is growth. So, very important. Will be asked on a part 2 somewhere. Maybe not this question, definitely somewhere. If interest rates go up, there's less investment spending and therefore less long-run growth. You actually get a leftward shift of LRAS in the end of that. If interest rates go down, you get more investment spending, more capital formation, and as a result of that, more economic growth, which means LRAS shifts to the right eventually, in the long run, decade out from now. That's when it happens. So those are all the domestic effects, none of which are in this question, at least not yet. In this question, we have the foreign effects of interest rate changes. Now, this is a little bit more straightforward. As a foreigner, the only real things I look at if another nation's interest rates are changing is, do I want to put my money in those investments? Wrong word, I don't want to use that word. Do I want to put my money in those financial assets? Let me put it that way. Those financial assets instead of my domestic financial assets. Well, that's not really about whether or not my interest rates are going up or down necessarily. It's about, are my interest rates going up compared to the other country, my other option? So if I go with the question here, we have the United States and the European Union. So let's just pretend that's true. So I go to, let's say there are only 2 banks in the whole world, Citibank and Santander. Citibank's a U.S. bank, Santander's a Spanish bank, a European bank. So let's say I go, okay, I go to Citibank, and Citibank's offering 5% on some savings account. Okay, cool. I take a look, foreign accounts, and find out, that Santander Bank's only offering 3% on their accounts, right? A percent's a percent. So I'm cool. I'm an American. I ain't going to give my money to these people. I'm good. I'm going to keep it here in the American bank account because I'm making more return here. However, what if you're a Spaniard, a European, citizen, and you have the same options, Santander or Citibank? Your bank, Santander, is offering 3%. Citibank over in America is offering 5%. What will you likely do? You're likely going to exchange your euro dollars for US dollars, put that US dollar in the American bank, wait however long you want to wait, take the money out of the US bank, get US dollars from the US bank, turn it back into euros, and put it back into your pocket. And you will have more euros at the end of the day if you do that, because 5% is 5%. Now, there are some variables. Does the exchange rate fluctuate significantly between dollars and euros during the time period where you had your money in dollars, etc.? But they're not going to get that far into this. So in this case, the answer is European Union is a major trading partner of the U.S. Given your answer in part A about the real interest rate, which we said the real interest rate was going to decline in this case, right? Going to decline. Will the United States dollar appreciate or depreciate against the euro? So if the United States if the United States economy is seeing a decline in interest rates, Europeans will not want our money because they'd rather keep it in their banks. If our interest rates are going down, they're just going to keep it in their banks and accept those financial assets instead. All right, they're better. So the United States dollar is going to depreciate against the euro through a decrease in demand for the US dollar from Europeans and an increase in supply from Americans who are not stupid and want out of US dollars and want to stick their money in that Spanish bank now. So they got to sell their US dollars to the foreign exchange market. So there's going to be a twofold effect. Increase in supply of dollars to foreign exchange and decrease in the demand for dollars by Spaniards in that same foreign exchange market. The net result of which is the E drops in both cases. I can draw that. They didn't ask you to draw it, but I can draw it. God, this is horrific looking. It's still better than some of your work, guys. Gotta tell you. Okay. So if we draw our foreign exchange, all right. So they said to ask about the dollar, so we'll do the dollar. Foreign exchange market for the USD. Okay. Boom and bang. We've got quantity of USD. I know I'm in the way. I'll move it. Now, remember your template. Remember your training and you will live. Euro per USD. And the reason I want to draw this is because how many kids screwed up the letter. Oh my God, that's horrifying. That's a D. Sorry. That's an S. Don't make fun of me. I'm special. Okay, this is an E. That's a damn good E. That's a Q. Oh, that's a very special Q. I gotta erase that. I might forget what the hell that is in a minute. There. So that's how you set up the foreign exchange market. Now the result will be, again, this is the US dollar market. So either, it could be either way, a decline in demand, so this is D1, and you'll notice the E drops down to here, E1. Or you wouldn't do both, an increase in supply, sorry for the jankiness, which again at least leads to the same sort of decrease in E. That's the same result. So that's how you do that. So yeah, if you're saying to me like, oh my God, like interest rates are complicated. Yeah, I told you that. I told you interest rates are the most complicated stat in the entire course because it's got so much going on with it. But that is the full Monty of it, okay? That really is. Now, again, return to the question. The European partners will not want to buy the U.S. dollar because the U.S. markets don't have much in the way of investment, financial assets worth putting their money into. So they're going to leave them back in Spain, decline in demand for U.S. dollar, the dollar depreciates. Now, suppose the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of the United States, decides to offset the change in the value of the dollar identified in Part B. Would the Federal Reserve buy or sell euro, and will it buy or sell the dollar? Okay. Complicated. I'm surprised they're asking it. This is not freely exchanged currency. This is what China does. This is market manipulation of currency. So in other words, they say, no, we don't like that. So we're going to go out there as the central bank of the U.S. and artificially change the result of the foreign exchange market by stepping in here and playing big boy with the big toy in the sandbox. So here's what they're going to do. If they want to drive up the appreciation of the U.S. dollar, to do that, they've got to sell euros that they own. They got to flood the European market with euros, therefore making it less valuable, right? Increase the supply of euros, and you'll decrease the exchange rate, the value of the euro. It'll depreciate it. Where the hell did the Federal Reserve get euros? Central banks have currency of every type on planet Earth on demand all the time. They do this intentionally so they can engage in these transactions. You know, if the United States needs to engage in international trade or stuff like that, I told you it's often the central banks that fill in the gaps ahead of those payments so that way foreign exchange can be flowing. There's a whole theory about the way trade works in the world nowadays that is basically on time, on demand. So like products get made when they're ordered. There really isn't like this huge stockpile of stuff lying around anywhere. Things are made, shipped, and sold as quickly as possible. And that's only possible if the foreign exchange of if the central banks of these various nations are greasing the wheels ahead of the money actually moving. So it's quite common for them to have foreign currency. Don't be surprised at that. So they're going to sell the euro for sure. Now, to raise the value of the dollar against the euro, you got to get it off the market. You got to take it away. How do you do that? Buy it up. So if you buy up the dollar, you'll make it more rare. That'll raise its value. You could draw the foreign exchange and see that, okay? So if I pull up my janky foreign exchange, oh geez. Okay, so if we were here, all right, back to my Q. That's a Q. Pretend. All right, so if we go back to here, and this is America's market, and the Central Bank of America wants to, reverse the fact that we've had a decline in the dollar's value, the depreciation of the dollar relative to the euro, they could either sell euros, which would drive down the value of the euro. This is not the euro market, this is the US dollar market. Or in the US dollar market, they can go ahead and buy the dollar, meaning increased demand for the dollar, which you could see if you shift demand to the right, raises E. So the bottom line is if E is falling for some reason and they want to reverse it, you sell the euro and buy the dollar. You flood the market with euros and you make the dollars harder for everybody else to get by buying them up. This is how you do it. America does engage in stuff like this. We do this. It's not uncommon. So it is a very kind of high-end, very complex, but very real question. Suppose the Federal Reserve wants to counteract the real interest rate change identified in Part A. Okay, what the hell happened in Part A? I don't remember at this point. What monetary policy action would the Federal Reserve take? I think we said it declined in Part A. Yeah, so they had a surplus. So the interest rate declined. Suppose they want to counteract the real interest rate change identified in Part A. What policy action will they take? Well, hold on. Is it a limited or ample reserve market? I didn't see. Did anybody see? I mean, that matters. I'm looking for them telling us, is this a limited or ample reserves market? I don't see any answer to that. Okay, that's janky. So there's two ways to answer the question. So let's just assume for a minute they mean limited reserve market. They probably do. So what policy could they put in place to offset the action that led to the real interest rates declining? Remember, real and nominal interest rates move in the same direction in the short run, okay? So if real interest rates declining and you want to counter that, you raise nominal rates and real rates will eventually raise as well. So you could just do that. How do you raise the nominal rates? Well, you could sell bonds as a policy action, and that would make the money supply smaller, which would raise those interest rates. If, again, they're not giving a lot of answers as to what exactly they want you to do here, so I'm going to use... Hold on, sorry. Oh, whatever. So, the other thing they could do is they could increase the required reserve ratio, again, limited framework only, or they can increase the discount rate, all of which would make it harder for them to acquire monies and make loans and grow the economy. So if they want to reverse that lower interest rate, they could take any contractionary policy action they want. That's if it's a limited reserves framework. What if it's an ample reserves framework? And we'll check the answer key because these people did not identify which one it is. And that to me is a total no-go. Like, you have to identify which one it is, unless I'm missing it. I don't think I did. If it's an ample reserves framework, then they're going to raise the administered rates. If they raise that interest on reserves balance, that policy rate, if they raise it up, that will incentivize banks to leave their money with the Fed and collect that interest, as opposed to lending it out. So let's check the key, because I really don't know. I mean, my presumption is they're asking you to think about this as a limited reserves question, but I certainly wouldn't go ahead and just assume that. All right, so this is part D. See, that's some stuff. See, they assumed an ample reserves framework. See, I said increase the administered rates, interest on reserves. They could take either one. All right. Now, feel free to put it in the chat. Does anybody see ample reserves anywhere? I don't. No, nowhere do I see that. Now, I mean, in reality, the really real world, the Federal Reserve of the United States today, in real life, 100% has an ample reserves framework. We're the only country in the world that does, to my knowledge, after the craziness of 2008. So, I mean, it's not unreasonable for them to. I think it's unreasonable. Actually, I think it's pretty jerky. I think that's some pretty gross stuff. That's kind of stinky. Oh, Jesus Christ! Sorry. I think that's kind of stinky. They shouldn't be doing that. They should tell you flat out. Now, this has not appeared on an AP exam. At least I can't imagine it did. It's a practice exam. Yeah. So I'm assuming somebody would call that out and be like, no, you can't make that assumption, because they'd have to accept the limited reserve answer. It's not like they're putting a date on this. This could have been 1997. Who the hell knows? So, yeah, I don't know. But you do got to be, honestly, what do? What's the right answer? Someone put it in chat. You get this question. They don't tell you if it's ample or limited. What is the right answer? You're not going to like the right answer. What do you do? What should you do about it? How would you handle it? They don't tell you limited reserve. I'm sitting here. I don't see limited reserve. What should you do when you write your answer? Come on, 13 of you are here. Someone can tell me what to do. I'm pouring more coffee while you type. Well, Abby, I wouldn't just do that. I'd do them both. I would say, now you could. I mean, I can't see how they could possibly mark you wrong if you did that. If you say, assuming there's ample reserves, but I would just do it both. I'd say, well, I would literally call them on it. I would say, since the question did not specify limited or ample reserves, if there are limited reserves, these are their three options. If there are ample reserves, this is their one option. And bet, done, move on. And that's it. And let me tell you something. Somebody is going to catch that. I really don't think that would make it. This question would not make it to a final exam, like an actual print AP exam. I think it would be caught before that happens, because they cannot accept. They'd have to accept those limited reserves answers. They can't just assume, well, it's the U.S. and we actually use ample reserves. Yeah, but they don't give a date. They don't say when, where, or how. This is nonsense. They can't do this. So just, I want to point that out because that's important. All right, I'm looking at 9:10. Are there more questions? Other topics I have not gotten to. I'm reading over what you guys said. I think I hit the three big ideas here. Pakistan's blowing up right now, so I'm a little curious what's going on with that. Hopefully none of my students with Pakistani family live in Kashmir. But the let me know. I mean, what else can we talk about? I'm here. I got another cup of coffee in me. If no one answers, I can go back to question 1 here. We could do this long question. We'll see what it is. Oh, Lordy. Okay. You want to do it? Let's do it. Why not? No one's talking, so I'm talking. Okay. Assume the country's economy is in recession. All right. That's nice and simple, at least. You got us a Phillips curve, label the current equilibrium point Z. Well, if you were in class today, we basically did this, and the one in class was harder than this, right? So let's draw that Phillips curve. Let's get rid of my Jankomatic 12,000 foreign exchange here. And let's go ahead and do the Phillips curve. So, oh my God, come on. Why? Okay, great. Okay. Now remember, drawing the Phillips curve is... Oh, I'm hitting shift. I am a moron. Sorry. That didn't help. There we go. Okay. Right. So remember when you do the Phillips curve, LR, PC, SR, PC. Don't confuse that with the ADAS. All right, over here, label-wise, this is your inflation rate. Apologies for the extra capital letter there. I am too tired and lazy to fix it. And this is your unemployment rate. Okay. Down here, must be. In the absence of numbers, and we have no numbers here, natural rate of unemployment, make sure it goes underneath the LRPC. And then over here, you can put your equilibrium point as whatever. Now, they said, show the recession and label the equilibrium point Z. So what I had there, this is going to be worth 1 point, as is. Now, Z has got to go somewhere over here. Why does Z have to go somewhere over there? You got to show greater than the natural rate of unemployment because they told you, and they didn't give you a number, so that's going to be a U. They told you that your economy is in recession. Recession means more than the natural rate of unemployment. And that's your inflation rate over there. So that's the other part that's you're going to put in there to get the question right. So if you do all that, that's 2 points right there. All right, back to the question. Assume the banking system has limited reserves. Okay, so now this means we're not talking ample, we're talking limited, we're talking money market, we're talking things like open market operations actually work, etc. Banks in this country hold no excess reserves, typical in loanable fund. In a limited market situation, limited reserve situation, and the public's holding of currency is constant. That is a fancy way of saying velocity is constant and money demand is constant, I guess. It's a weird way of putting it. I'm trying to think what the implication would be of saying it like that. I don't know. The required reserve ratio is 25%, big number. The central bank of the country buys $100 billion in bonds from the non-bank public. Okay. That's some complicated stuff. How much will the monetary base change? All right, so let's talk about monetary base. They probably have it right here, actually. The monetary base is a simple definition. You need to know it. They do ask about it. So your monetary base... Oh, they didn't tell you what it is. Sorry. Duh. I figured they'd just show you what it is. So, monetary base... Thinking he probably has it here for you, and if he doesn't, we'll find it quickly. I don't see it. Okay. I was hoping to be on there. Monetary base. Really simple. Total amount of currency and all the actual reserves that are available. All right. Whether they're excess or required, it doesn't matter. All the reserves, all the money. So it's basically M1 without... but it's not accounting for things that have been loaned out or whatever. It's just, if you have time today, you go over the tools of monetary fiscal policy and how they shift the graph. Yeah, Abby, that's definitely going to be like a Thursday thing at this point because that's a big, big, big question. Plus, it'll fit in because I want to show the graph, the cheat sheet on Thursday too. But yeah, 100% we could do that. That's the most important thing in the course. If you can do those two things, you're going to be fine. If you can't, well, time to panic. So, your monetary base is, and this is a simpler way of doing it, just your currency in circulation, just literally the currency, and the reserve balances, again, excess and required. It doesn't include things in checking accounts. It doesn't include things, because remember, checking account, no, you're, no problem, Evan. Checking accounts can be much, much bigger than the reserves, right? Because I don't know if you heard that. Some guy with an exhaust that's just popping. Guy needs to Simonize that piece of crap. All right, so, right. So remember, your checking account balances, your savings account balances, they're going to be a lot bigger than the reserves. Reserves, well, yeah, because they can loan some of them out, right? So like if I give a bank $1,000 and they got to keep 25%, which was our question, that's $25 in required reserve. Okay, they do get the $750 in excess reserve, but if they loan it out, it's not part of the monetary base anymore. So do remember, it's got to be money they haven't loaned yet. It's got to just be sitting in the bank, either cash, required, excess, whatever. It's got to be sitting in the bank, basically, okay? So the monetary base will change by $100 billion. Why? Because a bond is not even money. It's M3, right? A bond is M3. At its very best, it's M2. If it's a savings bond, right? And it's a small one. But it's mostly M3. Because usually when they say bonds here, they mean treasury bonds. So if they're buying treasury bonds from the public, that means that they're giving the public the money, the $100 billion, and taking back the bonds. So what that means is the people now have 100 billion. Where is that money? In the pockets of everyday people. Monetary base has gone up. That's currency now out there, okay? Or more likely, it's been stuck in the bank accounts of everyday people. But then again, we haven't been told that it's being loaned or anything, so we can just assume it's in the bank accounts, and therefore it's there as excess reserve, so it's part of monetary base. So that change is just 100 billion. Now, calculate the change in the amount of loans in the banking system in the country. Now, this is you need the money multiplier. So that is definitely here, not here. Our boy Charlie. Come on, Charlie. Here we go, Charlie. Money multiplier. Unit 4. Money multiplier. 1 over the required reserve ratio. So your required reserve ratio is 25% in that question. 1 over 0.25 is 4, right? You can put 4 quarters into a dollar. So 4. 4 times the 100 billion equals 400 billion. Now, can they loan all that? No. Remember, there's a 25% required reserve, right? So they have to keep some of this stuff around. And so if you look at the actual answer, and I'll walk you through it. All right. So the actual change in the banking system is only going to be 300, not 400. Because, right, they're keeping a quarter of it in effect. For every 100 that's been deposited, 25 bucks stays in the system, stays in the bank, stays in required reserves. So you can only lend the 75. So 75 gets lent, and then you multiply that by the multiplier of 4. And then that's how you get your 300 bucks, okay? So that's all it is. You take the $75, so you have your $100 deposit, in this case, this $100 bond purchase. That goes into the people's pockets. They eventually deposit it. When they deposit it, 25% has to be held in reserve. So you can loan 75 times 4, that's your multiplier. The whole thing's 300 bucks. That's how you figure that out. Now, the change in money supply is 400. Now, let me explain why. This is a trick question. Based on the change, wrong question. Calculate the change in the money supply in the country and show your work. Okay, this is all based on this bond purchase. So, I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. One of them, the answer is $400. One of them, the answer is $300. Listen carefully. If I take the $100 that I have here in the old, hidden stash, and I take this $100, let's do that right now. All right. Here's 1. Here's 2. Here's 3. Here's 4. Here's 5. Okay. $100 cash money. If I take this literal 100 right here, is that 5? That's 5. If I take this and put it in the bank, how much does the money supply change by? The answer is $300. Why? That's already money. That's M1. So the change is the extra money that's generated from this existing M1. Now, a bond. Here's a bond. Okay? Here's a bond. This bond is not money. It's a bond. It's M3. So what do? When you cash this, or if the Fed buys this off of me, they take an M3 and turn it, hit my mouse, and they turn it into this, which did not exist before. So this is new now. Okay? It's abracadabra. This is new now. This has not existed, now it's here. So this is part of the change. Then it gets lent. Same thing as my first scenario. It gets lent. And another 300 is created. So the new 300 plus the 100 that was created from this bond being cashed out, which was not money, this was M3, means that all of the 400 now is a change. Not that I had an existing 100 that multiplied. I had no money, 0. That bond went from M3 to M1 and became money. Congratulations. It's like the Immaculate Conception of money. It became money, and then we lent it. And that means the whole thing counts. So that's why the answer for this is 400 and not 300. It's because it was a bond purchase. If they had said, Bobby Bitts takes $100 from his pocket and sticks it in the bank, how much does it change to money supply? Then the answer to 3 is the exact same answer as the answer to 2. Because it's simply going to be already existing money he had in his pocket. He puts it in the bank. Money's money. We don't count this existing money as part of that change. And everybody goes on with their day. So that's how you figure that out. I know it's a little complicated. I come back to this thing I've been saying now this entire damn course, right? The course ain't hard. It's knowing what to do is hard, right? Once you know what to do, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's pretty easy. Sure, but you got to know what to do. So that's a real key feature of this, okay? You got to know what to do. Really, really, really seriously. You got to know what to do. Okay, so. All right. Now, draw a curriculum graph of the money market and show the effect of the change in the money supply identified in part B3 on the nominal interest rate. Okay. Money supply would move to the right. So if you draw it, I might as well do it. I'm getting tired. What the hell? Oh, that's handy. So remember, the Phillips curve is the exact same shape as the money market. I almost got away with it. Most of it's still there. Okay. So this is nominal interest rate. This is quantity of, oh boy, M1. Horrific. That's your equilibrium. That's an A. That's an R. That's a Q. The Q is the best thing up there, ironically. Okay. So once again, based on this bond purchase, what happens? Buying bonds makes the money supply bigger. Buy bigger. So, money supply, this sucker here, MS, and this is money demand. Sorry for not finishing that. Money supply would shift to the left. Leading to a lower interest rate. That's it. And that's showing the effect. Based on the changed interest rate, how will the international value of the currency change? Okay, we just did that. Right? That was the last question. So interest rates have fallen. According to this, interest rates have gone from R to R1, right? Because we've increased our money supply. If they go from R to R1 and they decline, that's going to make foreigners less interested in our dollars as a financial asset opportunity. It's also going to make Americans less interested. The value of the U.S. dollar, this country, whatever country it is, will depreciate. You can't say down. You got to say depreciate, okay? And then based on your answer in part E, will the country's net exports increase, decrease, or stay the same? Now, if your value of your currency declines, that means for people to get into your carnival, it's cheaper. Your ticket prices have declined. When they go to the ticket booth, they can go ahead and buy access to your economy via your currency by buying your currency at a cheaper price than they could previously. That will incentivize them to come to your carnival because it's a cheaper experience for them. So the exports of your country will rise. The imports from your country will decline as you, a domestic citizen with this weaker currency, cannot buy foreign goods as easily. They will be more expensive. So your imports decline, your exports increase, your net export balance, the net export balance will increase overall. Okay? And that's it. I explained it. All right. Anybody else? I got 5 minutes left of me. I'm getting tired. The coffee's not holding up. I'm losing viewers. The energy of the whole thing is fading. I did see the... let's just do M1 and M2 right now. You have a security alert on financial impersonation scams to review. That sounds like a scam. Okay, so let's just do it right now. That's going to take like 17 seconds. So what you need is a list. What's M1 and what's M2? Remember, there's actually 4 different categories. There's M0, M1, M2, M3. M0 is dead. No one's going to ask you about it. M3, that's supposed to be a bright red, it didn't work. M3 is dead. No one's going to ask you about it. M1 equals all of M0. What was in M0? Just currency, just cash. That's all it's in there, right? Cash and coins. So the money I'm flashing around here, that's M0 technically. Plus, it also includes all checkable deposits, sometimes called demand deposits. Those are just checking accounts. And all savings accounts or savings deposits, sometimes called non-checkable deposits. Remember, this is the most liquid form of money. And remember, M1 and only M1. This is the one we call money. You see money, you say money, it is money, money supply, money, money, money. We mean M1. What is M2 then? Well, M2 includes all of M1, which means by definition it also includes M0. So any of the things you'd find in M0 or M1 are also in M2. Be aware of that. It's the nesting doll thing. Now, what else is in addition to M1? So you get small time deposits, which are things like CD accounts, certificates of deposit, which are timed, where you tell your bank, hey man, I'm not going to touch this money for 6 months. Do as you want. Just make sure I get a better interest in a regular savings account. And they say, sure, no problem. Here's 3% instead of 0.3%. Since we're promised that you're not going to come looking for the money, we can lend it all out. That's a certificate of deposit. Small time deposits. That's the certificate of deposit. You also include in this MMMAs, MMMFs, money market mutual accounts, money market mutual funds. Will they ask about that? They could, I guess. What are money market accounts? Well, banks will pool together a lot of people's money, buy international currencies, and play the shell game of, all right, if I trade the dollars for the euros and then trade the euros for the Sri Lankan rupee and then buy dollars, we'll end up with more dollars than we started with. Shell game. That's money market mutual accounts and money market mutual funds. Okay, that's generally what they do. There are other types of them. That's an overly simplistic thing. They're not going to ask you to define exactly what they are, but that is the definition of what they are. And that's it. M3 though, M3 is where the government treasury bonds are. So that's why I always want to make sure you guys know that, because that really confirms that it's not, treasury bonds are not just not M1, they're really not M1, they're M3. They're quite a few steps from M1. So they're really, really, really not money. Remember, when you say money, you mean M1. When you read the word money, you mean M1. That means your money market is the M1 market. Like, are you grasping this? The money demand is demand for M1. The money supply is demand for supply for M1. M1 means money, and money means M1. There is no substitutions, exchanges, or refunds. That is it. Okay? That's it. That's all there is with the M's. The only other thing you'd ever be asked to do with them is to calculate again the money multiplier. The money multiplier is just one. Actually, you wouldn't even use this. Sorry. That's just got nothing to do with this. I don't even know why I brought that up. I mean, you know money multiplier, but not for this. That's it. There's nothing else you have to do with the M's. That's it. Just know what they are. That's it. I guess maybe calculate them. I guess they could ask you to, here's 10 things. Here are what they're worth. What's the money? What's the M1 of this economy? I guess they could do that, like they did with the GDP calculation. I suppose I probably have seen that once or twice in my career. Don't remember it, but it's definitely possible. All right. So, speaking of money, here's my $20 bounty payout. Bring that cheat sheet tomorrow to class, and it's yours. At least if yours is the best. Remember, the best is what I think is the best. Now, it's not a scam. It's not a trick. I will give this out to somebody, whoever has the best one. Wrong thing. There we go. Whoever has the best one, I will pay, but you got to bring it in. So make that cheat sheet. Now, again, it's got to go on a single sheet of paper, right? So a regular old piece of computer paper. No bigger than that, please. And again, I'm looking for 2 things. All the graphs, any other useful information you think might belong, and something that can honestly be replicated from memory day of the exam. If it's overly engineered, I'm going to say, nah, listen, man, this is very impressive stuff, and it's a nice study sheet. But truthfully, I don't know how many people are going to be able to recreate this from memory. It's got to be something that people can recreate from memory. So go for things like readability, legibility, good organization, a format that's nice and colorful and makes sense. Again, don't bother doing it on like Canva, because a kid can't recreate Canva in the moments of the exam. All right, so we're going to call it there, guys. Thank you. Appreciate your time, and I'll see you on Thursday. Later.